Yeah, my name is Brian Gallagher. I chair Jacksonville Travel and Tourism Board. We're a seven-member board that is tasked to allocate 60% of the annual lodging tax collections in Teton County by the electeds, which are county commissioners, and Teton or town council. And then Kate Sled is our executive director, who we work closely with, and she's not technically staff, but kind of as close to what we have as staff. I was going to talk a little bit about tourism and the growth that we see in the industry, but Jonathan covered that very eloquently. And, I think it's also important to remember that how important tourism is to our economy in Teton County and our quality of life, which Anna covered really well. And so I appreciate those boxes being checked before I start. But for the TTB and for, we're not a destination marketing organization or a DMO, but we sort of behave like one. And we feel that the organizations who are most successful in doing what we do understand that tourism is really not about the tourist. It's about using tourism as a vehicle to improve the quality of life for all the community members who live where these tourists want to visit. And I think that's really important. And we sort of look at what we do through that framework and seek to be part of the solution. And if you look back in 2010, the lodging tax was passed again, and the TTB was set up in the spring of 2011. And it was in reaction to what happened in 2008 with the global recession. And we were looking to bring more tourists to Teton County in that fall, winter, and spring months so that we could have a more year-round economy and people could afford to live in Jackson and not be so transient. And since then, a lot has changed, really. First of all, the budget of the TTB has increased from, my understanding, it was somewhere around $1 million and $1.5 million to we're looking at more like 5 million plus, eventually going to 6 in the year. And then, I think our scope of work has changed. The focus has changed from sheerly promoting tourism and being focused on their shoulder seasons and winter seasons into something quite different, which I'll talk about today and kind of try to inform people about the direction we're heading and why. In terms of how much is too little, how much is too much, how do we know? We look at this from a supply and demand perspective. Too little is when you have too much supply and not enough demand. So businesses don't have enough revenue to hire. People can't sustain jobs in the community, and the community can't offer really culturally and livelihood enriching services like the fantastic restaurants that we have and the culture institutions like Center for the Arts, and then even more basically, the grocery stores and pharmacies that not all the communities in Wyoming enjoy that we get to because they're supported by people beyond our local populations. Too much is when the demand side starts really stressing the supply side, and when the community is feeling overrun, and when the quality of life for the residents is starting to deteriorate, and the natural environment that a destination like ours is so dependent on. People do not come to Jackson Hole to stay in a hotel room and get on a plane to do so. They come to see this incredible beauty that we're surrounded by. And so it's something that we really want to make sure that we protect. And tourism, not managed correctly, does potentially have negative impacts on those natural resources that are so critically important. And then just right really is when supply is matching demand. You have a good economy. The community is vibrant, and the quality of life is high. And that's really where we want to try to live. And it's no surprise that the tourism has increased quite a bit. And we're starting to see some indications that maybe we are getting a little bit hot on the demand side of things for tourism in the valley. And we're definitely expecting the busiest summer ever. Kind of briefly from a macro perspective, the TTB, we get an incredible amount of credit for stuff that we have nothing to do with. And that's both good and bad. There's some macro trends that are really impacting our destination, the amount of people who are interested in visiting. It's really increased in outdoors and outdoor experiences. This trend started before the pandemic and was just ultra accelerated through the pandemic as people were looking to get out of their metropolitan environments they're living in. it's the destination promotes itself right now with this huge increase in the use of social media. A picture of the Grand Teton or these beautiful places in Yellowstone. There's really no other destination that I can think of that is so beautiful, visually represented through social. And so many people are promoting for us. Demographic of these digital nomads, people can now work for wherever. We saw a huge increase in basically second homes becoming primary homes and people working remote from our valley. Multi-destination ski passes were introduced. That was a huge marketing tool for places like GHMR and bringing more people into that skier funnel and bringing more people to the destination. Tax is playing a role with the repeal of SALT, and it really happened before then. It became extremely tax advantageous to domicile in Teton County, both from an income tax as well as an inheritance tax perspective, which is increasing the population. So these are things we don't have any control over, but they're happening and increasing tourism. And so the question naturally goes to, okay, what can we do about it? Where do we play? And we look at our the electeds as our bosses. That's who we report to because they report to the broader community. And those are really our what we consider to be our key stakeholders. And reading from the comp plan, one of the objectives is just create a sustainable economy not reliant on growth, which I think is a really important point that the comp plan makes. And from there, we were looking for, okay, we're seeing these impacts. We're starting to try to continue to shift our strategy, but we were really looking for a greater license to operate. And so we actually did a survey before our retreat this year, asking business members on the Chamber's listserv how they're feeling about tourism. We were basically afraid that we were potentially hearing from very, very vocal potential minorities on either side of the spectrum in terms of super pro tourism or super anti tourism. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what's in the middle? And the results were interesting. High level, we received about 200 responses, and we just asked people, hey, how are you feeling about tourism in Teton County based on these seasons? And we did fall, winter, spring, and summer. And summer, not surprisingly, and the prompts were, we have too much tourism, we have just the right amount, or we need more. Summer, 78% of the businesses said we have too much tourism, which is, I think everybody knew that already. But the TTE mandate of bringing more tourism in the spring, summer, and fall, or sorry, not the summer, spring, fall, and winter, it was interesting to learn that the people responding too much actually started to outnumber the people saying we needed more directly from the business community. And so for fall, it came in at 31% said too much, 18% said need more. For the winter, it was 39% saying we already have too much versus 16% saying we need more. And then spring, need more, one out at a ratio of 35% to 20%. And so this was our business community really saying, this feels a little bit hot, and potentially it gave us greater license to operate to change our mandate and become, instead of just focusing on promotion in the summer, winter, and spring, really look at managing tourism in all 4 seasons. And the pandemic was an interesting stepping stone to this because we really didn't spend any money on promotion this past year, or very little in a traditional sense where you're really looking to drive demand. We're really trying to educate people around COVID and trying to keep the community safe, because there was all of a sudden this public health environment or public health dynamic of, if you had a huge influx of tourists that weren't prepared or didn't know what to expect, it could potentially increase the risk of spread and impact public health. So we were basically moving towards this more destination management model. And then I guess the last factor is that when the statewide lodging tax passed, it gave the board more liberty to spend money to educate the tourist in addition to promotion. That was changed when that state lodging tax passed, and it gave us more flexibility from a legality standpoint. So just a point of clarification, which I think is an important misconception. There was an article in the News and Guide last Wednesday saying, hey, do we really need to be spending 60% of our lodging tax dollars on promoting Jackson? We are tasked with spending 60%, but when you look at our actual budget and you pull out what is direct promotion, the number is really more like 35 to 40% of total lodging tax collected is actually spent on promotion. And then of that, there's that $1.9 million of contract advertising. So much of that was pivoted over the last year to not be demand focused and be more educational focused, which we think that pivot is going to continue. So what can the TTB do? We think the first step is getting a destination management plan in place, which is a holistic study of the destination as well as the community stakeholders on how to manage tourism and getting a cohesive plan together. And so we RFP'd this in the middle of March, and we're expecting to have those back by May 17th, and then select an agency to work with in mid-June. We think that's the first step, and it's critically important of how do we manage this continued growth, and how do we continue to manage tourism in the best interest of the community. You know, the objective is to make tourism work for everyone, not just the business community. The business community is critically important, and it's not something we're ever going to forget about, but we consider this to be everybody who lives here is really who we want to focus on and make it work for. So in the short term, it's implementing and getting that process started. We're also launching some pretty large educational campaigns this summer about how to behave as a tourist in Teton County. Pretty simple stuff to most people who live here, like, hey, you know, don't pet the bison. We're going to put it more eloquently than that, but stay on the trails. You know, your behavior impacts wildlife, and a bunch of different messages that we're putting out to the tourism or tourists this summer. In the past, we hadn't done that. We really just kind of pretended like summer hadn't existed, but we feel like we can play a role to help there. And we can't close the gates. You know, everyone is entitled to seeing these public places and experiencing where we live. We can just help mitigate their impacts, and we do it through the messaging, but then also partnerships like many of the people who we see on this call. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to kind of go through a bunch of these bullets about everything that we're doing, but you know, the main takeaways here is that, you know, the TTB really wants to be part of the solution, and we think that there is room to really broaden our focus to do that, from promoting those 3 seasons to really managing tourism in all 4 seasons, and working with all these different community organizations as well as community members to do so.